No Kings demonstrators turned out in droves on Saturday in thousands of cities, towns, townships across the country. Organizers say more than 3,300 locations participated, including 600 new locations in mostly rural and red communities. Among them, Juneau, Alaska, Minot, North Dakota, Overland Park, Kansas, and Waukesha, Wisconsin. Tennessee, historically red and conservative, had thousands of people turn out to events across the state, including in Chattanooga, where a safety marshal estimates at least 4,000 people gathered. Rallies were also held, listen to this, you guys, in Pulaski, where the Ku Klux Klan was founded, and in the city of Lebanon, where ICE planned to put a detention center to hold at least 15,000 detainees. Those plans were later scrapped. Joining us to get into all of this, Holly McCall, editor of the Tennessee Lookout. The Lookout is part of State's Newsroom, the nation's largest nonprofit state-focused news organization. Holly, thank you so much for getting up early and hanging out with us. When you look at those numbers in Tennessee, when you think about Pulaski, when 4,000 people in Chattanooga, what should those of us on the national level take from what's happening in Tennessee?
Tennessee has always been a conservative state. It has not always been run by Republicans, but even when Democrats were in charge, it was clearly not a liberal state. And to see the scale of these protests grow in under a year, I think is something that everyone should take note of. When you have 400 people in Lebanon, Tennessee, which I don't think has got a Democratic official elected in the entire county in which that sits, or Pulaski, Tennessee, or Jackson, Tennessee, a highly conservative part of West Tennessee. Chattanooga had twice as many people as they've had in the past. I think it says that there's an undercurrent of unhappiness in this country and in traditionally conservative parts of the country in the South.
And Holly, there was a lot of opining taking place yesterday on who exactly was attending these protests. I want to play this clip from Tomi Lahren, who speculated a bit about the makeup of the people who showed up yesterday.
I noticed it was largely made up of older white people with a lot of rage.
Are they also handing out like Metamucil and Depends with this lineup? I mean, it doesn't seem like it's something that young people are latching on to.
Does that square with what you were seeing, Holly? Were they handing out Metamucil yesterday? At least where the Chattanooga, Tennessee Lookout team was?
I did not get any of that in my goodie bag. Paying protesters to be there, and of course that's a joke. I did see a lot of older people, but I don't think that's a bad thing, because I think many of us, as we get older, I'm 61, tend to get a little, what's the word I'm looking for? We tend to get a little acclimated to things. And I actually think it's pretty important that older people are out protesting. Some of these are folks who have protested in the 60s. I talked to one woman who was 70 years old, and she was so excited because it was her first protest. And she said, my daughter doesn't want me down here, but I think it's so important. So it's some of these baby boomers who I think have gotten very complacent. And there were a lot of older people, but I also saw a lot of younger people.
Holly, I wanted to ask you about Marsha Blackburn, the senator, Republican senator from Tennessee. So there was this mega center they were planning, and it looks like it's not happening now. Can you talk about that? Because that sounds like a lot of Tennessee pushback and successfully working out.
Yes, we broke that story on a Friday afternoon, and it didn't go anywhere. By Monday morning, it had exploded. I think every single Republican lawmaker who had a comment on it at the time said that we were wrong, we had the wrong city. And when it became clear, when ICE continued to confirm that, yes, they were planning to put this mega detention center 30 miles from Nashville in a small community, it was amazing to see how that community turned out to protest that. There was a county commission meeting with, I think, 400 people at that, packed into 3 overflow rooms. And Senator Blackburn eventually did get involved and pushed back on it and, took credit for that center not being placed here. What's interesting to me, though, is she is running for governor this year. She's the front runner in the Tennessee gubernatorial race, and she is very approving and enthusiastic about President Donald Trump's immigration policies. And yet when it gets cited in her backyard and she saw that there was pushback to it, She also pulled back on it. I'm going to note that in the town she represents, Franklin, Tennessee, it is arguably the reddest part of Tennessee, very conservative. There were 1,700 protesters yesterday, and there were a lot of anti-Marshall Blackburn signs.
I would just like to note, as we all know, that y'all might have issues, Republicans, that these older people out there, but older people vote, as you well know. Holly, I want to read something from the Lookout. Anti-Trump No Kings rallies draw thousands across Tennessee. Quote, in Chattanooga, a multi-generational turnout included Molly Brooks, 15, who attended the No Kings rally with her stepfather, Kevin Brady. Quote, I wanted to make sure people know I'm passionate about who is president, she said from inside her polar bear suit. And I guess there's a multi-generational aspect of this that goes beyond 2026 and 2028. And so when you are someone who you and your team are on the ground talking to younger voters, and they have never known a world without the politics of Trumpism and the ways in which we operate nowadays, what do they tell you, and what does that tell you about what's coming next when they're in charge?
Boy, to sound very old, the youth give me hope, and I think they're going to save us. But there are a lot of, when I say young people, I'm not talking about young people in their 30s. I saw people in their teens who are soon to be voting age, like Molly. And that gives me hope, because it might be all they know, but they have enough of a moral compass to know that what they're seeing is not right. When their friends are being taken out of school, when their friends are afraid to come to school, when they see people they know being taken away by ICE, they see their parents upset about grocery prices. I heard a lot about grocery and gas prices yesterday. I heard a lot about the war. I hear young men who are afraid that there's going to be a draft. And so I think these young people are the next maybe Vietnam-esque generation that are going to protest, they're going to vote, and they're going to run for office.
Yeah, Holly, and we're out of time, but just to add on to that list that you were just going through is some good, amazing reporting from the Tennessee Lookout from August of 2022 was your coverage of a court ruling that Confederate memorabilia was allowed in a jury room and that it wasn't prejudicial. I think we should note that it says quite a bit that protests are being held in the community where the Ku Klux Klan was founded and where a courtroom is still allowed to hold Confederate memorabilia. But thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for your excellent reporting from the Tennessee Lookout.